Hello, my name is Charles Davis, and I am a workforce development training consultant with the Office of Emergency Preparedness. And today we're going to be having a conversation surrounding conflict management. You'll see that the title here is Conflict Management Rules of Engagement because truly, when we're talking about conflict management, we're thinking about the rules of engaging when it comes to having interaction and engaging with other people. And then we'll also talk about how it's not only just with engaging with other people, because conflict can exist with other people, it can exist internally, it can exist with groups. And so we'll get into that as well. So before I begin, I just wanted to say a really quick thank you to all of you for your service and for your assistance. To us as an agency, it's very selfless to give of your time. We know that we're all very busy, and that we also have many things to do. And I know many of you are working as well as volunteering. And even if you're not working and volunteering, that's still great that you're giving up your time and being gracious to provide that resource to us. So thank you very much. And so, by way of introduction, you'll see my picture down there on the left corner. Things have changed since then. I may have a few more gray hairs, as you can see. I've gotten a little older, but it's still me, I promise. But one of the things I wanted to start with is you'll see the Delaware flag here. I am a Delaware native, born and raised. And once I graduated high school, I decided to step out from home and take a journey to upstate New York, hence the Ithaca's gorgeous t-shirt there. And I went to Ithaca College, obtained a bachelor's in healthcare management, thought that I was going to be on track to be a hospital administrator. So then I left upstate New York and went to Pittsburgh. As you'll see the picture down there on the right, that is the wonderful Pittsburgh skyline. Went to graduate school, got a master's in business, started working at the University of Pittsburgh Medical Center and made my way up pretty significantly, became a practice manager, and then moved from Pittsburgh and came to Virginia. And that's when truly I became public health. I started working with the health department. And, besides one little short stint, I didn't look back. And I'm grateful that, I've had this opportunity and that I'm able to be here. And now in this role as a trainer, being able to spend this time with you all. So in terms of an agenda and what this presentation will look like, we're going to touch on some learning objectives, and then we'll run into what is conflict. What does it look like? What does it sound like? I mean, at times, what does it feel like? And then we'll talk about some various types of conflict, because it can come in various forms. And like I touched on earlier, it's not just the external conflict that occurs that we may have with a person or another individual, but we can have it in groups, and then we can also have it within ourselves. And we can have it with society as well. And so we'll also talk about the causes of conflict. Why does it happen? What may initiate that conflict that happens? And then we'll move on to some various levels of conflict. So we'll talk about that, they'll kind of run together with the types of conflict, but you'll see that as well. And so when we think about conflict, it can be healthy and it can be unhealthy. So we'll talk about that as well. A lot of times we may have the negative connotation and we may think about the anxiety that forms with it, or the nervousness that we have when we think about, or the fear that is associated with conflict. But it doesn't always have to be that way. And sometimes the results that stem from it can be fruitful. And we'll have a look at that as well. So once we've figured out what conflict is and what exactly it looks like and feels like, we'll also take a gander at what conflict management is, because that's what we're here to establish, right? So now we see what conflict is. Now, how do we resolve it? How do we get around it? How do we fix it? So we'll go through that as well. And we'll break that down into, what is conflict management? What are some techniques that you can use? What are some effective behaviors when it comes to resolving it? And then what are some of the skills that you can take away after this presentation as well? And so the first cousin of conflict management, conflict resolution, we'll also talk about that and have a look at that as well. And then we'll just talk about some scenarios and some cases that'll help us kind of go through that as well. So starting with the learning objectives, as we talked about. So we'll go with or identify what conflict is. So what it is, again, what it looks like, what it feels like, and then we're gonna make sure that you understand the difference between, healthy and the unhealthy conflict. Want to make sure that we see, like I said, conflict is healthy, conflict's unhealthy, and what that variation is between the two. And then ultimately, I want to make sure that you have an understanding of the conflict management techniques so that you can walk away from this presentation with not only an understanding again of what conflict is, but how you can resolve it, how you can work your way around it when it does happen. Because as much as we'd like to say, no, we don't want conflict and we don't like it, it's definitely bound to happen. Within the past couple of days, I'm sure that we've all experienced some sort of conflict, but no matter how small or how large, we've probably seen something. So one question I want you to take the time to think about, and you can take this and think about it in your head. What words or phrases would you associate with conflict? Again, a lot of times people may think about the anxiety associated with it. So in terms of causes, you may also think about anger is one of the other feelings that may come with that. But you also may think about some personality differences that, cause that. There may be some unmet needs that someone has, or there just may be some misclarification or unclarification regarding, a specific role and how someone is supposed to be working. And sometimes it's just differences, over different methods or different goals, or people just have a difference in opinion. So in addition to that question, I also want you to think about how many people or how, if you have experienced conflict this week. So again, thinking about the fact that it's, even within the past couple of days, probably within the day, depending upon the time you're watching this, but you still may have experienced conflict because again, it's very difficult to get around it. But what we really want to figure out is how to work with it and resolve it. So what is conflict exactly? So if we're looking at giving a specific definition as to what it is, conflict is the competitive or opposing action of incompatibles, an antagonistic state or an action. Again, it's an inevitable part of life. It's going to happen. We may look at it and think of it as opposition, as a state of discord, as a disagreement. Again, we talked about the differing values or perceptions that people have, but does it always have to be damaging? Does it always have to be bad? And hopefully not. So we'll go into, the healthy versus damaging conflicts. So in terms of what conflict looks like, conflict can look like various behaviors. So it can be passive, it can be aggressive, it can be unintentional. Sometimes it's, as simple as if we're thinking about it in a work setting, instead of me going to Tommy's desk to have a conversation with him, now I'm sending an email when I know good and well he's probably 2 cubes down, and we can have that conversation. And then now that person's not returning my messages, so now we're just letting this conflict fester. It can be aggressive. We may think of it as someone shouting, someone swearing, someone cursing at another person. It can even be as aggressive as, physical, but hopefully it doesn't get to that point. And sometimes it's just the unintentional things that we see in people. So someone may be, someone just may be playing with their hands a lot, or someone has their facial expressions are very tense. So we can see that that conflict is festering within. And a lot of times it can come from what we see on the slide here. So the miscommunication, the need for someone to fully communicate what they're saying. Because you gave me a half direction, now I don't know what I'm doing. And now we're both frustrated because I don't know what I'm doing. And you're frustrated because I'm not doing what you think I should be doing. But I really don't have the understanding, so how can I? We also have an insubordination piece. So someone possibly not following the chain of command that is expected of them. Or there may be a lack of commitment, so there may be a lack of connection. So specifically when we think about volunteering, and of making sure that our goals and our specific mission in life is aligning with the vision and mission of the agency, so that we're meeting on the same playing field. And that just goes to the next one. There may be differing goals and or differing opinions, and that may lead to the varying personalities that come out, I don't like to something as simple as I don't like to drink water. I like to drink juice. And someone didn't bring, any water. They only brought juice, knowing that. And then outside sources. So, you may be volunteering somewhere, and then it may be someone who's in the community. It could be someone who you're working with in terms of an agency member. But whatever the case may be, we're always looking at a way to make sure that we can communicate through that conflict. Let me say that. So, what may be some of the causes of conflict? So, one of the main things, or I'll say one of the items, or one of the things is leadership. So, no matter where we are, we have leaders in our lives. And so, sometimes if someone has a certain directive that we don't understand or we don't necessarily agree with, the immediate reaction is just, well, I'm not going to do it, or I don't want to do it. I'm going to do it my way because I feel like this is the way. So now, as a leader, I'm thinking, well, this person's disobeying or being insubordinate intentionally, when really it's not intentional. It's kind of just, I don't know how to convey to you that this is how I work. So that really rolls us into personality conflicts because it's really how someone functions and how someone operates. So as much as, we may stick in groups that we think are alike, and we may hang around people that are like us. We have our friends that we say, oh, they're just like me. That's my friend. But even in friendships and even when there's relationships like that, there's still conflict that can occur, because we're still all raised differently. We still have, even if it's just the inkling of a difference, there's that difference that's there. And then it can also be surrounding task-based conflict or work style conflict. And again, I'll combine those thinking, we're looking at them more so, I'm working toward a certain goal and I have to do X, Y, Z to get toward that goal. How I get to Z, starting with X, or if I start with S, how do I get there? People may look at, one person may try to get through it just with Y and Z at 2 steps, but some people may take 5 steps. So now it's like, well, are we doing the same thing? I don't understand. How do you not know what I'm doing? How are you not doing it the same way? And so with the task and with the work style, if we're communicating through, if we're having an understanding of what the other person, what the ultimate goal is, then we can hopefully get to where we need to get safely and without any problems involved there. Like there are 4 main levels here. And the first one being the interpersonal conflict. And that one, when we think about interpersonal, we think about when two persons have different goals or approaches in their relationships. And then if the interpersonal conflict is not addressed, it can become very aggressive, very destructive. You may be at a level where you need a mediator. And we don't want to get to that point, as you saw with Buzz and Woody. And then the second one that we have listed here is the intrapersonal. And again, that goes back to what we were talking about, what takes place in someone's mind. So the everyday thoughts of, whether I need to make sure that I do X or not. If I do it, what's going to happen? If I don't do it, what's going to happen? These are battles that we may have on the daily, may not, hopefully not. But if you do, just that's how we would label that. And then we also have the intergroup conflict. And with the intergroup conflict, that's when two groups are going against each other. And then that can be problematic just because, you think about specifically if we're all in the same group, we're all doing the same assignment, you would think that everyone gets along, and you would think that everyone's on the same page, and you would hope that everyone's on the same page. But every once in a while, that's not going to happen. And so those are 2 different groups. And then same, interestingly enough, with the intergroup, similar level there, we're thinking about the group dynamic and how it's affected because of the level of conflict that can occur. So when we think about conflict, we talked earlier how it can be healthy and unhealthy. So when we're thinking about the healthy side of it, it's definitely rooted in trust and respect. And that's why I say often, and I'll probably say it several more times throughout this presentation, that communication is key when it comes to making sure that we're having healthy results from our conflict. But as we look at the list, when we're having healthy conflict, it does great things. It does foster innovative thinking. It gives the opportunity, it opens the door for someone, to have the explanation and have the time to say, well, this is how I feel about something, this is how I think about something. And even though it may not be you agreeing with that, at least we have the time to talk it through. And then who knows, after that conversation, we may come up with something, boom, creative, as the second bullet says, so that it also boosts creativity. There's a safety aspect to it as well. And then it's objective and it's fact based. So it really just fosters a perfect environment. I feel like, for communication levels to be high, for people to have the true opportunity to express themselves. And I believe that people are, we function best when we're able to be our authentic selves, and as opposed to the fear that may come, or the idea that, that's associated with the second column there, something's right versus wrong. There's always that right and wrong. There's no in between. There's a level of superiority. So specifically speaking from a leadership level, someone is saying, I'm right, I'm the leader, I'm the boss, I'm the lead here this evening, whatever the case may be, that truly takes away from any idea that someone else may want to provide. And then distrust. Trust, and we'll talk about this actually in a couple slides. Trust is one of the main factors, one of the key factors when it comes to having healthy conflict, and when it comes to, trying to prevent or get away from conflict altogether. And then it stifles collaboration when it's unhealthy. It doesn't give anyone the opportunity to really talk. I'm afraid to say anything, so now I'm just going to go along with what you said, even though I may have a great idea in the back of my head. But I'm scared to express that idea. I'm scared to say anything because I don't know. I don't know how that may come across to the person on the other side. So continuing talking about unhealthy conflict, and like, oh, I lied. I said it was a couple of slides, but it was the next slide. So speaking about trust, you see that that's the base of this. So we're talking about the dysfunctions of the 5 dysfunctions of a team, and you'll see this triangle before you. And at that base, at that bottom, is definitely trust. We want to make sure that people are able to speak, and that I also not only just speak, but I also want to make sure that I'm speaking, and then I also want to make sure that the person that I'm speaking to is being honest, and that so we're creating a circle of trust, or you know, a landing of trust, if you will, since it's there at the bottom. We also talked about fear of conflict, so you'll see that in this triangle as well. It stops when we think about fear, it truly does stop, or it has the ability to stop engagement. It doesn't have to always, but it definitely has the ability to. It may hinder it, it may impede it, it may slow it down. Whereas I may have an idea, now I'm not saying it until a week later, or I'm saying, oh, well, I was thinking of that because now someone else said it. And, there's nothing wrong with getting a little credit either. And then so lack of commitment there in the middle, you want to make sure that you have the buy-in that you need. You want to make sure that, the team is all committed to that same idea. And then the avoidance of accountability is second to the top. Truly, accountability is liability. You want to make sure that there is a level of being liable for your actions, being liable for what you say, being liable for what you do. And at the top of that is the inattention to results. So if we're not paying attention to what's going on, or if we're kind of just moving all willy-nilly and doing things just because, and not making sure that things are in order, our ducks are in order, as people say, that can really be problematic for a team. That can really be problematic for an individual as well. Going back to thinking about the internal conflict that we may have, we want to make sure that our ducks are in order as well. So we've talked about conflict through this first section, and so we want to move forward then to talk about exactly what is putting it together, conflict management. So conflict management itself is the process of reducing negative outcomes of conflict while increasing the positive. So I'm looking at these pictures. I hope that none of you had to be in this state of mind of these top 2 pictures at any point during this week, but it happens. I've definitely been in meetings and been in situations where I have been the person like, whew, man, this is crazy. But then we really want to have come at it as a more collaborative approach. And you'll see in the bottom picture, it looks like when you have the young lady, they're smiling, and the guy's like, this is what it is. It seems more friendly. I could be wrong, but it seems more friendly. So, in terms of conflict management and getting through it and resolving the conflict that we have some techniques that we can work through. And we'll start with this diagram to our right, with the top being competition. When we think about competition, it's definitely it's assertive. It's not cooperative. It's definitely like it is a competition, someone going against someone or something going against something. There's no sort of collaboration there. The goal is to win. It doesn't matter how I do it, I'm going to win. But sometimes you have to step back and say, it's not about me, it's about the team. So I'm going to take it as a more collaborative approach. And in that case, you'll see the green box, both parties win. So this gives us an opportunity to truly say, I don't necessarily agree with what you're saying, but we can collaborate, we can meet in the middle, we can kind of figure out what's what here, and which connects us to compromise there. You'll see that in the orange box. So compromise is when both parties win because they're willing to give up something. So sometimes it's a matter of, I really want to, you know, do, I'm gonna change my letters. I really want to do D, but I'm gonna instead meet in the middle and do E because I know somebody wants to do F. So it's really about meeting in the middle, making sure that we're on the same playing field, on the same page, and have an understanding, but communicating in that all along. Because again, if we're not communicating, we can't really compromise because I can't tell you what I'm thinking and I don't really understand what you're thinking. So then one of the other ones we'll see down to the bottom right. I'm going to leave the purple one for last, but accommodating. So sometimes you just have to accommodate and give up. Give up. I'll put quotes around that, just because it's not worth it. One party is essentially just yielding to the other party. These are things that don't really matter, if you will. But one of the last ones that you'll see is avoiding. And so we want to stay away from avoiding because avoiding it's basically the decision not to handle, right? So you're not gonna do anything about whatever the situation is. In this case, one or both parties seek to suppress the conflict. So you know what, you have it, you got it. It is what it is. I have no will in me. I have no unction into me to fight about this anymore. But the problem with avoiding is now I've just let something settle within me. So now let's say I'm having an argument with Tina. I'm having an argument with Tina, and Tina and I have a discussion. We're having this conflict. You know what, Tina? It's fine. You got it. You're right. You're right. How many of you have heard someone say that? I will actually raise my hand and definitely say that I've said that to someone. You got it. You're right. And then all that does is just let it fester within you. So then you keep having conversations, you keep working with someone, you keep meeting up with this person, and then next thing you know, it just gets explosive. And then rewind back to Toy Story, we run into issues like that. And that is definitely what we want to avoid. So again, avoidance is not one of the ones that I recommend, but out of the other five, you can work your way and you'll see, how it fits and how it's applicable according to your situation. So when we're talking about behaviors in terms of conflict management, what do those behaviors look like? So you want to be very candid. You want to be receptive. You want to, depersonalize. You want to listen. So I feel like I could read these to you when we talk about them, but they're all associated with communication, right? You want to be clear. You want to be accountable. You want to recognize sometimes. So no matter what the conversation is, no matter the topic, as long as I'm being clear, there should be no problem. There should be clear instruction. And then at the same time, on the other side of that, whether I'm the person listening or, I'm the person speaking, there has to be a level of, I need to know how to listen. Often we'll listen to a conversation or be in the midst of a conversation, and I'm listening to, go back to Tina. I'm listening to Tina talk, but I just can't wait to get out of my head the rebuttal that I have. So I've paused at what she said. So she's still talking, but I've stopped right here. So I missed all of this rest of this conversation because I stopped listening. I'm just ready to talk. So we really have to be intent about the way we listen and intent about the way, we are receiving what someone else is saying. And that goes back to being receptive. And then on the other side of that, we want to be clear, we want to be candid and be accountable. Once you've said something, once you've done something, make sure that if it does need to come back, if we do need to revisit that, yeah, that was me. I said that. I did that. Whatever the case may be. And, a little recognition goes a long way sometimes. A thank you goes a long way a lot of times. Or maybe that's just me. And then, so again, we talked about how resolution is the close cousin of management. So, in terms of conflict resolution and what those steps look like, you'll see these steps listed in terms of getting there. So, you want to create an effective atmosphere, and that effective atmosphere truly can come from how much we foster open communication, foster the idea that everyone, is able to speak, everyone has a voice, everyone has an opinion, because at the end of the day, I mean, we all do. And then you want to make sure that there is some clarity that's happening. So be clear, be concise, be candid, like we talked about in the other slide before that. And we want to establish, like we want to set forth the goals, and we want to discuss those goals too. So a lot of times we're working at an event, we're working at a job. At the end of the day, we're still working to do a certain goal. We're working to attain something. So we want to make sure that we establish and know exactly what's going on, but that is connected with determine. We want to say that you agree. Sometimes you have to agree to disagree. But if we can get to a great point of agreement and we both agree, hey, we did something. But always take the time to acknowledge, again, acknowledging what someone else is saying, acknowledging what someone else is thinking, because that goes a long way as well. And so on the other side of that slide, you'll see the benefits to that. It definitely makes someone feel good. I think that in arguments or conflicts that I've been in, it definitely feels good when you're able to resolve it and, speak your piece and listen to the other person. And again, even if it's not a matter of, hey, I think we both should do G. Even if we don't want to do G, at least we've had the opportunity to talk it out. I felt like you were listening to me. I listened to you. Let's figure out how we can get around this, because conflict is not, when it festers and when it just sits and when no one tries to work through it or work around it, it's just causing problems. And then that no one wants to do that, because it makes it really difficult when you, especially at the workplace. I guess that's that's what I'm talking about now, especially at the workplace. When you're working with someone, and we work a lot, right? So when you work consistently with someone, and then every day it's just a mess, you don't want to go to work because of a person, as opposed to the job, or as opposed to the commute. That itself is a problem as well. One of the other benefits it promotes effective communication. Um, as a person who loves to talk, I think that communication is key anyway. But specifically here, as I said, I was going to talk about it and bring that word up a lot, but because we really should take the time to talk about things and express our feelings and express our thoughts, express our ideas, because you never know what can come out of someone's idea or what can come out of the fact that we had this conversation, which allows for less misunderstandings, right? So if I am not having an idea or a preconceived notion as to what you're thinking or what you're doing, because you just laid it out for me, then now I don't have to have this misunderstanding that, oh, oops, my bad. I thought that it was something else that it wasn't. So we miss out on all that, and that is definitely a benefit. And there can be a calming effect to that, right? So stress can be associated with conflict, because if we're having this fear that I don't want to say something, or I'm having this idea or preconceived misconceived notion of what someone is thinking or saying, then now that's just out of the book. That's out of the picture. I can come in and peacefully come in the office, peacefully go work at my assigned location, peacefully go volunteer, and not have any issues associated with that. So when we think about the do's and don'ts of resolving conflict, what do they look like? What do they feel like? Here they are right before you. So you'll see the Scrabble letters say do it now. Yes, this is something that if you're not doing it on a daily basis or attempting to do it, please do. Please try to be understanding. Please try to come at things with a resolution, and not just come at it with it's a closed door, it's a done deal. Be focused. You want to be focused on what's going on. You want to be open. You want to be actively listening, as we talked about a little earlier, and you want to acknowledge what someone's saying. Um, but on the other side of that, things that we want to stay away from, exit out, don't think about it, don't do it. Um, you don't want to interrupt. You don't want to attack. You don't want to put too much focus on the issue at hand without actually trying to resolve it. You don't want to disregard the issue, and you don't want to avoid it, as I talked about as one of the you know, ways to resolve conflict. And you don't want to impose your beliefs or your ideas on someone else, because again, that just doesn't open the door for anything. That actually can lead to conflict, hence why you don't want to do it. So, in terms of attitudes and how we look at going into, excuse me, conflict and how we think about it, starting with the bottom here, you don't want to play like a blame game in terms of helping someone through it. So you don't want to be like, it's all your fault. This is so and so is such a problem. Let me talk about this person. Let me talk about this issue. We really want to come at it with a resolution in mind, and not in an attack mode. You don't want to necessarily come at it as the second one here. We see poor me. I would not have these issues if I had more resources. Why can't my team just get along? Well, how can we actually figure that out? Like, how can I figure out how to get more resources? And then we also don't want to come at it as I just want to solve this for you. And I just want to fix this. I want to do this for you. A lot of times we got to have that collaborative approach because that helps us, get through it as one, as opposed to I just did what you told me to do. And so conflict management skills and what they look like, just building upon what we just talked about in the past two slides, you want to make sure that you manage your emotions as best you can. Things can get difficult, right? And sometimes we do just need to step away and take a moment and really think about it. And that's okay. There can be a temporary avoidance, right? But we don't want to 100% fully avoid it, even when it comes to the internal things that we may have going on. It's best to address them so that they don't grow into something else. When we plant that little seed, unless it's an apple tree, because I love apples, we don't want it to grow. We don't want it to be a weed. We don't want it to grow into something terrible, right? And going back to listening, got to make sure we're listening, got to make sure we're taking in what the other party is saying, what the other group is saying, having and listen intentionally. Avoiding assumptions. We don't want to assume that we know what someone's thinking. We don't want to assume we know what someone would do or wouldn't do, because we don't necessarily have the answer. I don't believe that any of us are psychics, but I know that I'm not. So I don't want to take on that barrier, or take on that task of trying to assume that I know what someone's thinking or going to do. And then we want to carefully criticize. I think that sometimes we want to quickly say, well, why did they do that? I would never do that. Or you should have done it this way, as opposed to getting an understanding as to why the person did what they did. And that can definitely minimize whatever conflict that may come later. And sometimes we do have to negotiate. Sometimes it is a matter of, like we talked about earlier, collaborating and compromising and meeting in the middle. We won't always get it our way. We won't, this isn't Burger King. So we won't always get that burger with the pickles and the onions. Sometimes you're just gonna get a burger, but at least you're eating. So sometimes we gotta negotiate. And then at the end of the day, hence why it's at the bottom and largely on the right, we got to follow the golden rule. It's really truly about, how would you want someone to treat you in a situation? And on the bottom of that, the invisible one that you don't see, back to communication. Having that open communication and the ability to have a conversation with someone goes a long way. So items to think about throughout the day, even after this presentation, you know, a specific situation. If you were volunteering at an event and you happen to encounter a patient, who was being argumentative or rude, what are some of the steps that you would take? What would you avoid doing? What conflict management technique would you use to address the situation? Personally, in this situation, I would think that, again, stay away from avoiding, because if this patient is upset, and again, this is a very broad question, so this could, thinking about it more specifically, you may have another thought or a couple other thoughts. But just looking at this question for face value, we want to avoid, because we want to have an understanding of exactly what this patient is upset about. What is the problem? And sometimes it's best, a lot of times it's best to take these conversations away from the group. If we are in a group setting, if we are in a, if you are at a vaccination clinic or something volunteering, and someone's being rude or upset, let's see if we can get them to the side and shift them away so we can have that conversation and have a better understanding. Sometimes people will, buff up and, get loud, and because they want the attention from other people around. But if that attention has been minimized and now it's just you and I, what are we going to talk about? What's the issue? Never want to do the same thing that they're doing. If someone's screaming at you, if someone's, coming at you like they're going to hit you or something like that, we don't want to do the same thing. We don't want to scream back, because that only elevates the situation and makes it even worse. So initially, definitely just, listen, like, how can I help you? Like, what is the problem? How can I help you get to the root of the root cause of this? I'm here to help you. I understand. I don't fully understand, but help me understand so I can help you through the situation. And then the second question to think about, to take with you, if you're volunteering at an event and you find that a fellow volunteer is incorrectly performing a task, so this person's actions, they're not only hindering you, but they're also hindering the team as a whole. So again, same three questions apply here. What are the initial thought? What are the initial steps? What should you avoid doing? And then what conflict management technique would you use to address the situation? So depending upon the situation, again, this can get a little more specific based on what you may see out in the field. And I'm sure some of you have probably experienced a similar situation already. But can we collaborate? Can we compromise maybe? Is there some way that I can help you through this? Starting with the conversation. And then just a little tidbit here, when we look at this, think about the conflict that may be happening here. Not only am I having the conflict with this other person, but internally, am I having conflict thinking about, should I say something? Should I not? Do I want to be what do they say, a snitch? Do I want to tell tale? Do I want to express the situation, or do I just want to take it on and let it be what it is? Does that mean that I have to do more work? Like, we don't want to make anything worse for yourself, that's for sure. So, really taking the time to lay out what's happening and kind of help yourself, really help yourself resolve that situation. So definitely take those two situations, think about those. Again, you've probably already been through similar situations, maybe worse, maybe better situations, but hopefully this presentation has been helpful. And then just to quickly close, this is a quote that says, "The quality of our lives depends not on whether or not we have conflicts, but on how we respond to them." Because again, conflict is inevitable. It is going to happen. But truly, it's a matter of how you respond to that and how you work with that. And so that wraps us up. Here is my contact information. If I can answer any questions, please feel free to reach out to me. I said earlier, I talk, so you can call me, you can send me an email. I believe that as a volunteer, you're still part of the VDH family and VDH team, so we should all be working together, especially to minimize conflict. So I appreciate your time, and have a great day.